my best friend Blaine.
The impact Ed, Edd n Eddy had on Cartoon Network as a whole is pretty amazing. The pitch for the show was so good, it was one of the first cartoons the network produced to start with the actual first episode and on a 7-minute short to test the waters. This was commonly seen with the water cartoon shows like Dexter's Lab or Powerpuff Girls or Johnny Bravo, along with the other shorts by prolific creators we'll get to someday. Danny Antonucci produced E.E.N.E. in Vancouver, making it the first Cartoon Network show not produced through Hanna-Barbera in Los Angeles, and creative executive Linda Semensky goes on to say, the fate of our working with independent studios rested with this show. So needless to say, a lot of faith was put into Ed, Edd n Eddy, and if you're watching this, I assume you'd agree their confidence paid off. So let's jump into the first episode of Season 2, Know-It-All Ed. This is a pretty interesting title card. I guess being a know-it-all would make you a jackass. What? I was saying like a donkey. The Eds go to the junkyard where they find turkey basters, which they repurpose into a new toy to sell the other kids, now called Canadian squirt guns. The Canadian squirt gun is one of the most memorable things in the whole show to me. Like, I don't think a single Thanksgiving goes by where I'm not randomly reminded of this episode. Speaking of Canadia, series creator Danny Antonucci grew up in Toronto, and despite the production studio being located in Vancouver, Season 1 didn't air in Canada while airing in the US, probably because this was before Cartoon Network was a thing there, but Teletoon had a lot of overlap with CN. Yeah, even this article praising the first season upon its second season renewal said for now you have to rely on tapes from friends in the United States. 25 years later, not much has changed, as it can be surprisingly difficult to find some of these shows, even if you have every streaming service. Like, if you pull the curtain behind all these companies, I wouldn't be surprised if it was just Eddie pulling the strings. I gotta say, these water guns do look really fun. Like, it really feels like a hustle, even though it's a repurposed, upcharged kitchen utensil, maybe not even repurposed when you think about it. The episode takes a really creative turn, where these water pistols turn the neighborhood into a Wild West, with Eddie serving as the marshal, and Marshal Eddie is nothing but a scam. Like, he fines everyone for random things like a railroad tax or public indecency on Sarah for simply existing, which is fair. Like, I think more people commented about just outright hating her than any other character. Johnny rushes into the cul-de-sac with Plank covered in kisses from some outlaws, which is obviously a canker ex machina coming in to ruin everything and punish the Eds for their greed. You gotta respect the Eds' hustle though, cause Eddie takes even more money from the kids here to protect them. We see the Ed boys get into a Wild West showdown with the girls, who just stand there aura farming as the Eds miss every shot.
Oh, I feel it. I feel the adrenaline, Eddie, baby!
The Kinkers' aim doesn't seem to be much better, but it turns out they were intentionally aiming for the Eds' feet, because their Canadian squirt guns are full of rubber cement, ending with the Kinkers once again taking the Eds' booty. I think the Canadian squirt guns are a hustle, but Marshal Eddie is such a scam, and I don't want to have more than one result per episode, so I think in the grand scheme of things, we have to call this episode a hustle. Sure, this was a pile of junk Eddie upsold as means to obtain power and status, but these look so fun. How can you call this a scam in your heart? Episode 1B, Dear Ed. Johnny and Plank split up after a fight, and Eddie sees this as a way to cash in, creating a store for friends. Now, Eddie obviously wants to quickly scam Johnny into buying a new friend, but Double D tries his best to match Johnny with his ideal pal. They make this traffic cone friend for Johnny he doesn't really vibe with. Like, apparently this cone Bob says Johnny has a big head, and even slams a ping pong ball into his forehead. But like, if you're losing in ping pong to a safety cone, you're either the worst ping pong player in the world, or we gotta acknowledge once and for all, when an object in the Eds world gains a face, it also gains sentience. The Eds throw a party in Ed's room with all these random objects, but only makes Johnny realize he misses Plank that much more. The rest of the neighborhood shows up to Eddie's party, including Plank with his new friend Jimmy, and I love this sequence of Johnny and Plank sitting against the wall, inching closer and closer to each other every time people walk by and block the view. The episode ends with Eddie's room getting destroyed as Johnny and Plank walk out together, so no money was made here, but it's one of my favorite, most heartwarming endings of the whole show.
Everybody's doing it! Bouncy, bouncy, bouncy! Ooey, 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 ooey. Excuse me, Eddie. This is my song.
If you can't beat 'em, show 'em!
As funny and iconic as Jimmy's dance is here, there's something really sweet about the Eds scam going wrong and just dancing it off. Like, the Eds love chasing the bag, but sometimes their scams don't work out, and they somehow end up making the world a better place for a change, and they just laugh it off. I love it. A matchmaking service for friends is a good idea, and although Eddie's intentions seem a bit nefarious, he does leave the matchmaking to Double D, who is pretty earnest in his efforts, and he agrees to Johnny's conditions to not charge him until after he gets paired with his ideal pal. It feels scammy to me, but really the Eds were just capitalizing on a scenario. Like, if they broke up Johnny and Plank to make him buy a new friend, that would be a scam, but I actually gotta mark this as a hustle, despite Eddie's efforts to make it a scam. Episode 2A, Knock Knock, Who's Ed? Sarah locks the Eds out of the house during a monster movie marathon, so they try to find other TVs in the neighborhood to watch the special. They pretend Ed got in a plane crash to get into Kevin's house, who obviously doesn't buy it, but I like that they just walk right into Rolf's house. Like, we really don't talk enough about just how chill Rolf is. He's the definition of work hard, play hard, farming while the other kids are playing, but he also knows how to just chillax. That's chill and relax, if you didn't know. Seeing Rolf's house is so great for his character and world building. Like, the plastic vinyl wrap on the furniture is so specific and really helps show off Rolf's family and background, which is based off Danny Antonucci's own experience, with his parents being first-generation Italian immigrants. My favorite part of Rolf's house has gotta be his TV. Like, it's such a small screen on this giant box, and there's even a lever to turn it on. Eddie and Double D don't really care for the movie on this small screen, maybe realizing a horror B movie is really gonna get exposed if you put it on a super small screen. But we know Ed's crazy for his movies, and he forces the others to sit down and shut up for the remainder of the marathon, where they probably just stared at the back of Ed's head for 8 hours. It's a pretty funny episode that I always appreciated for the insight it gave me into who Rolf is and where he lives. And overall, I gotta say it's a non-applicable entry. There wasn't really a scam, they just wanted to watch TV. Episode 2B, 1 + 1 = Ed. The Eds are all curious about life's many mysteries, like if the light in the fridge goes to sleep at night, or why Rolf has a thin cardboard tree. And the experimentation in this episode is so cool. Like, I will always remember Jimmy's outline being peeled off and sinking into the drain.
What the? Woohoo!
Is that Jimmy's outline?
You betcha! Let's sell it back to him.
Or Eddie taking a bite out of the sun and turning day into night. The episode really shows off the combination of the Ed's imagination and the beauty of animation. It's important to note, around the time Ed, Edd n Eddy was greenlit, the network wasn't just looking for sitcoms that happened to be animated, but cartoons, quote, visually eye-popping, gag-laden, character-driven, and most importantly, funny. Those were our cartoon goals. Needless to say, I think they achieved that. The episode ends with Eddie and Double D falling down a sewer hole, and Ed picking up the hole and running away from Sarah with it. It's a funny ending, but I'm always so fascinated by the show's attention to detail with the inner working structures like this. Like, I've never thought of a sewer as a big pipe tunnel instead of just a hole. Or there's a visual a couple episodes ago of Ed pulling up all the light poles in the neighborhood like a spool from this one spot. Like, I don't know if light poles actually are connected in some way like this, or how they even thought of this, but it's just an amazing visual gag that's super memorable to me. Even in the Ed's imagination, they still scam, pulling off Jimmy's outline and trying to sell it back to him, but I guess this was all just a dream. So I guess I actually gotta mark this as non-applicable. Episode 3A, Eeny Meeny Miny Ed. The Eds start the episode making a mini golf course, which is a really cool idea, but Ed breaks the robot obstacle by driving a golf ball straight through it. Ed wonders how Double D's so smart to be able to build and fix this robot, so Eddie convinces him Double D was an experiment made in a lab who's replaced the rest of the neighborhood kids too. So Eddie's running around, presumably naked in a bucket like a hermit crab, as Naz invites the boys over for a barbecue. Eddie wants to go, but he can't get out of the bucket, and the other kids notice this pest crawling around, so Rolf takes off his shoe and just smacks the stuffing out of him, ending the episode with Eddie still stuck in the bucket, the other kids all disappointed, and Double D still with no idea what's going on. It's a really funny, chill episode. Like, it doesn't have a complex plot, it really just lets everyone breathe, which I appreciate.
Who's up for a dog?
Yeah.
Huh?
Your puny wieners are no match for roast hunger.
How long's this cook for?
Done.
And these little details can't always be conveyed when talking about the episode sometimes, I feel. As much as I want to avoid marking entries non-applicable, I can't really call this episode a scam either, cause Eddie's just messing around with his friends. There's no transactions taking place, so I just gotta mark it as N/A. Episode 3B, Ready, Set, Ed. The Eds have a new wind-up toy that eats a hole through Ed's couch, even Eddie's stomach. When Ed goes under his bed to get it, he breaks through the bed, freeing these seagulls that lived in Ed's room, which is really funny, but also really gross.
Penelope! Edmund! Nestor! I hate birds. They're so useless.
Ed's seagulls are apparently named after Greek gods, which doesn't lead to anything, but is kind of interesting. Like, I don't know if Ed's read the Odyssey or if it's just a coincidence. Though Edmund isn't a Greek god, he may be Ed's renaming of Endymion. The Eds see Kevin set a record for the longest skid mark on his bike and start trying to break records themselves, which leads to a new scheme, the rocket car. The rocket car is pretty ingenious. Like, it shakes in place on top of a popcorn maker while Ed and Ed run by in different outfits based on the different countries they're exploring. Kevin realizes this is fake, taking all the other kids out and throwing the other Eds in, overflowing the popcorn popper as we see the Eds blast off again. As much as I love this scheme, I gotta call it a scam. It's dishonest with the promise of traveling around the world, but it looks like such a fun ride, it's well worth a quarter, and I would totally pay for this experience personally. So yeah, it's a scam, but a great scam at that. Episode 4A, Hands Across Ed. The Eds get the idea to make a TV show, and it's kind of funny to note the Eds have like a dozen scenes centering around a camera everyone wants to be recorded by throughout the show, including one of my favorite moments, which is Ed swallowing the camera, but that's for a later season. The kids have a talent show as an audition to be on TV, like Plank telling jokes, Jimmy playing his retainer as a jaw harp, even Naz playing the tuba, or is it a sousaphone? Jimmy's magic show on the big stage falls apart right away, so Rolf and Kevin have the idea to make their own performance in their backyard, which is really funny and wholesome. But this is Ed, Ed, and Eddie, man. So Eddie tries to hijack this show with this giant magnet they used at the beginning of the episode to steal everyone's money, but Double D put the batteries in backwards, so they get launched into a dumpster to end the episode. While the Ed's intentions seemed really scammy here, I'm hard-pressed to say a talent show's a scam. Similar to the comedian Ed last season, if Jimmy didn't sell when he was on stage, everyone would have been happy and it would undoubtedly be a hustle. Obviously that wouldn't make for a good cartoon, but you know what I mean. I think 30 episodes in, I've finally realized the odds are severely stacked against schemes being marked as hustles, cause a scam will be a scam regardless of how it's executed, but a hustle oftentimes has to have good intentions and good execution. While poorly executed hustles may be considered scams or demand refunds in the real world, I'm marking this as a hustle, just a bad hustle. But feel free to argue with me in the comments if you wanna, cause I really do read every single comment, even if I don't always have the chance to give a proper response. Episode 4B, Floss Your Ed. The Ed set up a SeaWorld scam for Johnny, and while I debate whether you can call this a scam if Johnny actually enjoys it, I can definitely say it's a scam that Johnny paid in coconuts. We learn Ed's last baby tooth is loose when he tries to bite down on a coconut, which I wince at every time I watch. That's just painful, man. So Eddie tries to knock Ed's tooth loose so they can get money from the Tooth Fairy. Eddie offers a percentage of the Tooth Fairy reward to the other kids if they help get Ed's tooth out, and it's really hard to watch still. Like, Ed biting a brick just makes me recoil. Kevin and Rolf bait Ed with a piece of buttered toast on a fishing line, but they actually end up knocking Eddie's tooth out here. So the Eds have a tooth now, but they run into a new problem, with the Tooth Fairy only appearing at night, but the candy store closes in a half hour. So they put Ed's bed on the roof and try to wave the Tooth Fairy down like a plane. The bed slides off the roof, and Ed's loose tooth, along with Eddie's, end up in the gutter, which Ed proceeds proceeds to suck through the pipe, meaning he also ended up eating the teeth here. I'm not even gonna try to write something funny about this, cause I don't even want to think about someone eating teeth. Like, I'm done. Let's just get out of here. I feel like it's kind of scammy to remove your teeth prematurely for money, but like, I don't know, it's their bodies. You can sell plasma and stuff. There's also the situation of the boys not getting paid for helping because they knocked out Eddie's tooth and not Ed's, which at first I thought was screwed up, but thinking more about it, I actually think this is fine. Like, Eddie gave them a condition, he'd pay them for this, and they didn't do the thing. He didn't want to lose a tooth today. Regardless of my defenses for everything the Eds do here and the scam vibes all throughout, I feel like it might just have to be a non-applicable entry. The intentions here weren't really good or bad, and in the end they just tried to get Ed's tooth out, rushed the tooth fairy, and ended up with nothing, except a stomach full of teeth. Alright, I'm out. Episode 5A, In Like Ed. The Eds have a garage sale, and we see Double D carefully lists out his prices, but Eddie charges $10 for a bottle cap, so it's definitely a scam. Kevin, on the other hand, makes some actual business deals, like not just selling Johnny a fork for 50 cents, but asking if Plank wants one too. The Eds spy on Kevin to see where he gets his info from, cause how else could someone be such a good businessman and sell someone their junk? The boys end up seeing a surprise party set up for Jimmy that they're not invited to, and assume that this is a meeting of spies that they attend undercover.
Yes. How long have you been a member of Kevin's inner circle?
Quiet, Eddie. I'm in disguise.
Naturally, the Eds end up ruining Jimmy's party with their big imaginations and paranoia, and really the whole episode revolves around the scammers' minds not being able to comprehend a good business deal. Like, Eddie prices stuff way too high, Double D prices his stuff way too low, and Ed, well, he's just Ed. So yeah, I gotta mark this as a scam. Like, if anything, Kevin was really the only true hustler here. Episode 5B, Who Let the Ed In? Ed makes an imaginary friend named Jib, which funnily enough is the name we almost gave my dog Chip. And I won't lie, growing up this episode got me to try and force myself to have an imaginary friend, but it didn't work. I gave it a good effort, but I just couldn't believe hard enough. But Ed makes it look so fun, even though they say a large cause for imaginary friends is loneliness or neglect, though we do know Ed has a big imagination. The Eds make a giant prize grab gotcha machine, but before the kids can get scammed by it, Ed gives the kids presents and tells them Jib said it's all a scam. So like, we already know this is all a scam, but let's continue the episode. The Eds need some professional help with dealing with imaginary friends and ask Johnny for advice, but as we know, Plank isn't an imaginary friend. He is a real living being. Though Plank suggests they build an imaginary trap for Jib. Whether or not Jib is imaginary, he's got real hands. Like, he just beats up and dribbles Eddie and throws him through a window. In the next scene, we see everyone crying that Jib's leaving, cause apparently his work here is done, and honestly, I gotta respect Jib for just coming to town and teaching Eddie a lesson. It's a fun addition to the lore of the ambiguously imaginary friends in the Eds world, even helping fight Eddie's scams. 6A, Home Cooked Eds. The Kanker sisters go on vacation, which means moving their trailer onto Eddie's lawn. We see May uses Plank as a back scratcher, with Johnny ominously watching from afar, and I gotta say, as scary as the Kanker sisters are, I'm much more scared of Johnny without Plank. I guess we should make an Ed, Edd and Eddy power scaling tier list real quick.
Yeah! Some of these, and some of these. Almost there, Ed! Done.
The Eds make a giant weather machine to blow the Kankers off their lawn, but Johnny dives in to get Plank back, slingshotting the trailer away and balancing it perfectly on the fence between Eddie and Kevin's lawns. I guess I never put together Eddie and Kevin were next door neighbors, or where exactly each house is in the neighborhood, but I love this little end scene.
Stay off my lawn!
Yeah, man, there's a... Oh, I guess you already know.
This episode's gotta be a non-applicable. Like, if anything, getting a giant fan to blow the Kankers away would be a hustle. So let's move on. Episode 6B, Rambling Ed. Eddie starts the episode doing psychic readings for the kids, and I don't know, I've never done a psychic reading before, so I won't comment on their legitimacy, but they're clearly scamming here with the magnet under the table. The scam gets interrupted by Sarah bossing Ed around, which is half fair, like Ed has this disgusting experiment in the freezer, but her list is pretty excessive. Ed moves out and lives in Rolf's shed now, with the Eds trying to help him live on the farm, but as usual, they just make everything worse. Rolf banishes them to only stay in the shed, which they do, even picking it up and walking into the kitchen where they raid Rolf's fridge and just leave everything there before running off, which is maybe the worst thing the Eds have done in the show so far. Rolf's patience throughout this whole mess is pretty amazing, like he's really one of the nicest characters as long as you don't make him mad. In the end, Rolf uses a bit of force and threat to make the Eds behave, like they're just flipping the shed around for fun, which does look really fun. And I even appreciate Double D engaging in the tomfoolery. Like he's not just a nerd or a dork, he's a kid. It's obviously a scam that the Eds live here while just destroying Rolf's property and sanity, and is overall a really fun episode that highlights both how lazy and innovative the Eds are. Episode 7A, To Sir with Ed. Naz babysits Ed, who thinks she's just waltzed in for a date or something. She makes this mac and cheese, which somehow looks both disgusting and amazing, like it's cheese with some random noodles in between. The urban rangers pull up along with Kevin, who makes fun of the rangers.
Can I be an urban loser?
Why do you mock us at every turn?
And Rolf shows off his giant block of ice he was gonna sell to Eddie's parents. Rolf pretty amazingly sculpts this into a giant chicken, which Ed brings upstairs to the bath, and in the ensuing chaos, breaks through the floor. So the rest of the kids have a party at Eddie's house while he watches from his room, ending the episode hanging by his tongue that's slammed in the door, which even now has a diaper on it. Aww. This is a super funny, classic episode of Ed, Edd n Eddy to me. There's no scam involved, unless you count Naz's hustle by virtue of being a babysitter, but the comedy of the episode's in large part from seeing Eddie nervous for like the first time in the show, while also knowing he's in for a rude awakening when he eventually learns Naz didn't spontaneously show up to give Eddie dinner and force him to take a bath as part of some sort of date. Episode 7B, Key to My Ed. This episode has the Eds finding a mysterious key and trying to figure out what it unlocks, like Jimmy's retainer, a cow udder, Rolf's accordion suitcase.
I'm out of here.
Bo-Katan! You're too fat for me! I'm too fat for you!
Eddie gives up on finding this keyhole and sets up a ransom note asking whoever managed to lose something to show up in exchange for 3 jawbreakers. Similar to the very first episode where everyone in town loses something and gets paranoid, everyone thinks the ransom must be for their lost item, turning the whole cul-de-sac against each other. The fight attracts the Kanker sisters who chase the Eds down, who arrive at Ed's locked house, only to realize the keyhole they've been searching for this whole time was right in front of them. Sorta. The episode ends with the Kankers locking the Eds up and playing footsies with them, and yeah, I'm not gonna show that on screen. I think it's inherently scammy for the Eds to upcharge/ransom someone's possessions here. Like, I understand giving someone a tip if they find your wallet or something, but the main conflict of this episode is Eddie trying to find this keyhole while Double D preaches about how it's wrong, so I'm gonna mark this as a scam. Episode 8A, Urban Ed. The Eds feel the cul-de-sac's a bit boring lately and long for the hustle and bustle of the city life. So they pull off one of the coolest schemes in the show, building their own cardboard city, Edtropolis. The city shenanigans are really funny, like the Ed's cars nearly running everyone over, or the anxiety Jimmy has in the crowds here. You know, that could be the start of a video essay called like, The Crushing Capitalism of Ed, Edd n Eddy. Johnny warns the others about the cold and dangerous nature of the city, but they all ignore him, like even Plank abandons him here. I really love this scene where Plank speeds by, nearly hitting Johnny, and the way Johnny hits his head on this trash can before getting out is so funny. Like, every shot in this show pushes a visual gag in a way I'd never expect. The Eds make a tattoo parlor where we see Jimmy get a face tattoo that goes kinda hard, or Kevin's back tattoo of a cob of corn, which I've always loved. Like, that'd make a pretty good contender for a first tattoo. The Eds are actually pretty good tattoo artists. house. Now, as we know, Johnny's kind of a berserker when he's separated from Plank, and we see him climb on top of a rooftop with a jar of money, entering a hostage negotiation. Johnny's eventually convinced to jump down, dropping the jar of money, which the kids all grab and run off with, as all the cardboard skyscrapers collapse, showing the inevitable collapse of capitalism, or something. I don't know. Although the kids of the cul-de-sac became a little more toxic in a city slicker sense, I gotta say this was a pretty authentic hustle. Like, the kids paid for tattoos and stuff, and had a pretty interesting environment to check out, kinda like an amusement park in a way. This episode's also one of the most creative in the Ed's universe for me. Like, I always thought this would be so cool to see recreated in the real world, and it's got that ingenious feel, like all you'd need is cardboard boxes. Episode 8B, Stop, Look, and Ed. The Eds start to question all the signs and rules in town, like keeping off the grass, or the wet cement the kids' basketball falls into. Eddie even goes as far as ripping the Do Not Remove tag off Double D's mattress, which is really funny, because I had one on my bed as a kid, and always wondered who was gonna find out if I removed it. It turns out these tags are more for the mattress manufacturer's sake, and for warranties, but yeah, I ripped mine off after this episode as a kid. Double D's stuck in the middle of the room, tied to the ceiling by his hat here, and when he tries to fight back, his hat just falls off, leading to the biggest mystery of Ed, Edd and Eddy that will never be revealed, just what could possibly be under Double D's hat. One of the earliest theories I would see online was just a cartoonishly large amount of hair, which is commonly referred to now as the Ed mullet theory. I think this Ed, Edd and Eddy Carmela Danson video, didn't think I'd be saying that today, was the first exposure I had to the question of what's under the hat, but I've also heard things like there must be some kind of alien antenna or something. Nowadays, I think a lot of people like the theory he has some kind of awful scar on his head, which also ties in well with the lore of the dodgeball incident we'll refer to in a couple episodes from now. I think the most interesting part about this dodgeball incident is just how integral it is to Double D's lore when it's not really mentioned all that often. Like, it's mentioned in the story Bible and that he doesn't go to gym class anymore, and there was even a deleted scene from the movie that really went into detail of this crazy story. Storyboard artist Raven Mollissey reveals on a DeviantArt thread that Double D was mercilessly targeted in dodgeball at his old school, retaliating with a dodgeball cannon, and this extreme retaliation is likely why he moved to Peach Creek as a young kid. So the closest thing we have to what's under Double D's hat is in the movie, where a newspaper clipping falls out from underneath it of him in handcuffs giving a public apology for said dodgeball incident. I do appreciate having a little bit of closure, knowing that the staff debated revealing this secret in the movie, but unanimously voted it would be better to leave this as a mystery and no answer would be universally accepted. It may sound like a little bit of a cop-out, but I don't know, for me it keeps the whimsy of it all. Anyways, back to the episode. The whole neighborhood's radicalized by the Ed's no rules rules, even Double D's aunts who got dropped out the ant farm and are running off with the ice cream, even the spoon. Double D walks up and says, "Hey, I called everyone's parents and they're on their way home." So the Eds get locked up in a cage in a tree, and honestly, they kind of deserve this. Like, Ed is such a square here. This is another episode that's not really applicable in terms of scams and hustles, and it feels like the earlier seasons do lean a little more into the slice of life of it all. Episode 9A, Honor Thy Ed. The Eds make a taco stand, which would be a great idea, but has got to be one of the biggest scams in the whole show, because they make these tacos out of grass, paper plates, and orange crayon. The devil's advocate on my shoulder wants to argue how is a plastic taco any more of a scam than a microplastic taco you'd see nowadays, but for the sake of the video, we'll just be moving along, though it does look kinda good. Jimmy gets scared of this haunted house with a bunch of rumors surrounding it, so Kevin offers the Eds a jawbreaker to go in, and as we know, the Eds will do anything for a Scooby snack, so they go in where we learn this house is abandoned, and they pretend to all be attacked here. Like, I love this little sequence.
I take back everything I've said about the twerps!
So the Eds cry wolf but get locked inside when the doorknob falls off, with the Eds eventually getting separated and flung to different parts of the house, ultimately leading to the Tunnel of Love where the Kinker sisters are waiting for marriage. It's a funny twist on the boy who cried wolf format, but despite the Eds crying canker, going into a scary house for a jawbreaker is definitely not a scam. If anything, Kevin was scamming because he never paid up here. Episode 9B, Scrambled Ed. Double D's sleepy because he stayed up building a scale model of a bridge for 14 hours, which leads to a bunch of half-awake, half-baked advice for the other kids who need his help, like Kevin's broken bike chain, or the fact that Plank grew a limb. Appendage? Out of all things that ever happened in the entirety of Ed, Edd n Eddy, this is maybe the most unrealistic thing to happen. Like, how did Plank do this? While all of this is happening, Eddie has an idea for some sort of SeaWorld aquarium-esque scam, but his sign collapses, blocking the stream and causing lobsters to take over Rolf's farm, which maybe also helps us narrow down just where Ed, Edd n Eddy takes place if you consider where lobsters live in North America. The whole neighborhood gets flooded, ending the episode with the kids floating on planks of wood as Rolf's hunger starts to create illusions. Overall, I'd say this was a scam. Like, the execution of it all caused so much damage to the neighborhood, not to mention the surrounding nature and wildlife. But even if the sign didn't collapse, there's a lot of work that goes into ethically acquiring these sea creatures that wasn't really done, so I gotta call it a scam. Episode 10A, Rent-A-Ed. This episode starts with the Eds creating a circus for the town, and I won't lie, it's a pretty great performance. Sure, it ends poorly, but when even the other kids are impressed, you know it's gotta be good. Ed breaks the seesaw with his final act, which gives Eddie the idea to become repairmen for the rest of the neighborhood, starting with Jimmy's easy bake oven his cookies are burning in. The Eds are actually so bad at fixing stuff, like they throw the oven through the wall, and we even see cookies burn a hole through the top floor of the house. Later we see Johnny get his head stuck in a tree, which we'll actually see a lot through the series, so add this to the Johnny head stuck in tree counter. When they go in Johnny's house to get soap to free him, Ed manages to break Johnny's sink and heat radiator, so they get the idea to just build a sauna in Johnny's house instead. They give Sarah and Jimmy these peanut butter skincare routines, which actually seem to be at least somewhat of a thing that people do, but then Rolf has a towel incident in the sauna and causes everyone to just run out. While all this is happening, Ed's been tied to a support beam of the house so he doesn't break anything. So yeah, Johnny's house is destroyed, and Plank tells Johnny what the Eds did, so he wields Jimmy like a peanut butter unicorn lance with Plank as a shield, which is surprisingly badass. Johnny really may be the most powerful character in the whole show. The episode ends with the Eds trying to run off, with Ed launching them into a fire hydrant as they flip around as a fun callback to the circus performance at the beginning. While the circus was a hustle for the most part, and the sauna was a good idea, I can't overlook the destruction Ed caused, literally destroying the entire home of a family in the process. There's also the fact they made the sauna in someone else's home while he was stuck in a tree, so yeah, that's definitely a scam. Episode 10B, Shoe Ed. Johnny's extra annoying today for whatever reason, which gives the Eds the genius idea to run a Frankenstein experiment on Johnny to make him the most annoying pest ever, so they can get paid to restrain him later.
Great, awesome.
Sarah and Jimmy pay to get Johnny out of their birdhouse, but Johnny's new customs actually align with Rolf's shepherd customs somehow. And funnily enough, the most irritating thing Johnny does is crack his joints, which really upsets all the animals on the farm. And like, I won't lie, watching someone crack their joints in front of you is really gross and sometimes disturbing. Like, did any of y'all sit behind someone who would do this like every day in school? Like, they take up half your desk for 30 seconds while also making sure to not make eye contact while it sounds like someone's dying in front of you. The episode ends with the Eds begging Johnny to get them out of the danger crate they carried him around in all day, which is now stuffed with all the distressed animals. And every time Eddie bargains for how much he'll pay to get out, Johnny raises the price. It's pretty malicious intent to create an individual so annoying people will pay to get rid of them, so I feel like any scheme that involves creating a problem just to solve it has gotta be a scam. Episode 11A, Ed in a Half Shell, starts with a gerbil for a day enterprise, which I love. Like, it'd be so fun to just live like a hamster for a day, and I bet this water tastes amazing. This scam isn't the focus of the episode, rather Sarah forces the Eds to watch Jimmy for the day, and this is where we see Eddie throw them into a game of dodgeball, where Double D first mentions his dodgeball trauma.
I have a history with this game. What's that? I see flashes, Eddie. Deep-rooted images. Listen to me, Eddie. Eddie, it's gym class all over again!
Ed and Jimmy actually get along really well, almost like brothers, as we see Jimmy even mimicking Ed, which Double D says is because a little brother would try to mimic an older brother to learn from them. I don't know why, but I always thought that line was so interesting. Like, it's nothing too crazy, and it might be relatively obvious, but I feel like it was just a nice, subtle little insight. Eddie applies this lesson by trying to turn Jimmy into his little brother's scam apprentice, but by the end of the episode, Jimmy becomes an actual hustler, making a giant trampoline he charges all the kids to use. When Eddie asks for his cut to the profit as the mentor, Jimmy cries for Sarah, who shows up and beats the Eds up, as Eddie can really only watch proudly as the student has now become the master. I think this episode's gotta be considered a hustle, like they successfully watched Jimmy, and the trampoline business isn't really a scam, though paying a cent a second to jump on a trampoline is a bit wild. Hey, we're not here to discuss prices, they bought it, they wanted to pay for it. This feels like one of the most controversial episodes of the season. Like, not only was it nominated for a Leo Award for Best Musical Score, but Jimmy really seems to annoy a lot of people with how he acted here especially, which is fair, but like, if anything, that's Eddie's fault. He created the monster. Episode 11B, Mirror on the Ed, is one of my favorite episodes. The Eds play Truth or Dare, which devolves into a game of impressions, with Eddie impersonating Double D impersonating Ed, and Ed, Eddie. There's something kind of magical about taking these characters and having them impersonate each other. Like, Double D impersonating Ed is probably a bit more earnest, where if Eddie were to do this, it would probably lean a lot more into insulting Ed's stupidity. So it's kind of like this episode has 3 brand new characters created from 3 characters we've seen every episode so far. My favorite of the 3 has got to be Ed impersonating Eddie. Like, just look at the vibes of Ed big chillin' in this chair. It gets cut short when Rolf needs Ed to help him stomp his raspberry bog, and gets mad when he finds out that this is actually Double Ed, which is kind of crazy. Like, how's Rolf gonna get mad that he forced the wrong Ed into unpaid labor? Double Ed D messes with Kevin and runs into Double D's house, which has an intruder alarm, opening the door for Kevin, as we end the episode with Ed now impersonating Plank, and Plank now has Eddie's clothes somehow, which looks surprisingly cool, maybe because of how baggy they are. Hashtag bring back planking 2025. Episode 12A, Hot Buttered Ed. The Eds are camping in a tent in the backyard so they can get a prime spot down at the creek, but end up fooling around and sleeping in. When they get to the creek, Kevin takes their spot, so they're forced to lay on rocks without shade, and this beach has always been so vivid to me. I don't know why, like it's relatively empty, but has always felt so real to me, like I've been here before. They plan to get their spot back from Kevin, and Double D low-key drops one of the hardest lines in the whole show.
Let's put a stamp on his head and mail him to Hollywood.
Too inhumane, Eddie. In chess, in order to position oneself, one must first go through the pawns.
The Eds can't take Jimmy's spot because Sarah's there, and as we know, Sarah's higher than the Eds on the power scaling tier list, so instead they climb up on top of this cliff overlooking Kevin's shady spot on the beach as they wait to make their move. Johnny's also up here, an even stronger character, but they manage to get him to jump off by blowing a whistle, which makes him think it's time for swim team. The Eds end up falling asleep waiting for Kevin to move, and wake up at sunset where they're all sunburnt and getting poked by Ed, who thinks they're like chameleons or something. Each poke presents an opportunity to stop this cycle of pain, but Eddie and Double D can't resist the temptation of revenge. This is another classic episode I always fondly look back on and always think about if I see a bad sunburn. I wouldn't really call it a scam or anything. Yeah, they kicked Johnny out of his spot and stuff, but it's really just more comedic and shows off that while the show may be remembered for its scams, I'll always appreciate these more peaceful, simple episodes like this. Episode 12B, High-Heeled Ed. The Eds make a bunch of ride attractions like a swamp ride in the sewer, which Sarah breaks up because of how gross it is, despite adding to the ambience of it all. And the Eds' main takeaway is the sewer's too gross for girls and Jimmy, so they go undercover to do their own reconnaissance of what girls and Jimmy like. When Sarah nearly loses her earring from having a fence smacked down on her, they learn that jewelry's the way to a girl's wallet and Jimmy, so they show off their new gold paint coated collection, like this gold fishbone or a bent spoon and fork. Ed accidentally spills the paint on his pants and makes these swag pants the girls try to charm Eddie and Double D into giving them, but then Jimmy offers $5. The pants almost immediately disintegrate, so Jimmy gets his money back, and the episode ends with the others running away from Ed, who got kinda smart now that he doesn't have pants on. This episode starts with a genuine hustle of the sewer ride, but ends with a scam of dipping random stuff in gold paint and pretending it was real, so this has gotta be a scam. Episode 13A, Fa La 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 Ed. I've had to record that like 8 times, it still doesn't sound right. The Eds hang out in Double D's house where they go through all his stuff, even finding a fruitcake in the closet, giving the Eds the genius idea to have Christmas in July. Have any of you ever had fruitcake before? Like, I don't think I've even seen one in person. Not only do we have Christmas in July, but it's also Piggy Bank Day in the cul-de-sac, where all the kids plan to break their banks to get all the change they've saved up. You may ask yourself why they don't just undo the little screw at the bottom and take the coins out, but a lot of older piggy banks were actually designed with only the initial slot at the top, incentivizing you to actually save your change and not just take it out whenever you wanted. Eddie's scam here is just like the Coinstar of piggy banks, where they put their bank into this giant pig and get money in their stockings below. It's definitely set up to be a scam. Like, I don't know what the kids would be getting in their stockings in return. Maybe it'd just be their money rounded up to larger bills while taking a 13% cut, which is actually really high when you think about it. The Eds then go door to door singing Christmas carols, which is actually a pretty earnest hustle that makes the others happy here. So for the first time in like 50 episodes since the pilot, the Eds finally get jawbreakers here, and it's actually for doing something nice. But then Ed plays Santa and just gives the jawbreakers away to the rest of the kids. So while there was an attempted scam with the piggy banks, they really end up spreading genuine cheer, even using their money to give back to the neighborhood despite Eddie's best efforts. So because they actually end up making the neighborhood a better place by the end, I'm gonna rule in favor of a hustle over a scam here. Episode 13B, Cry Ed. Eddie puts on a new show on this bubble bike thing, but a clothespin taps Jimmy's shoe, so he cries and is carried away. And as much as I love Jimmy, when he's annoying, wow is he annoying. Eddie catches on to Jimmy's cry for attention and pretends to be injured himself, but the other kids obviously don't really care. Jimmy's left on his own for like a minute, where we see an acorn fall into his drink, and then a tree falls onto him, and I guess I have to assume like a squirrel did this to Jimmy and he didn't just throw a tree onto himself for attention. This episode may actually be referenced at the start of the Ed and Eddie Misadventures game, when you throw acorns through the window to get Jimmy and Sarah to run out, which looks kind of horrifying. Double D builds a giant bubble for Jimmy to play in without getting hurt anymore, but Jimmy still gets attention with everyone playing volleyball with him, so Eddie makes a giant suit of armor, launching back into the action, only to launch himself into a pit along with Kevin and Rolf, who manage to crack open the suit of armor and beat Eddie up.
Quit wasting your time, Rolfie boy.
You're a freak, dude.
Behold.
Pick a body part, Rolf.
I am quite partial to feet, Kevin.
So this is how we end season 2, with Eddie getting hurt for real, happy because he can finally get attention from the other kids, and Eddie trying to injure himself both fake and for real has gotta be a scam. Like, regardless of whether the plan is real or not, it does seem pretty manipulative in how he tries to garner sympathy. At the same time though, they are just kids and kind of outcasts, so I always thought it was really interesting when the Eds didn't care about money or jawbreakers, and just wanted friendship or attention from the other kids. So let's take a look at Season 2's Scam or Hustle spreadsheet. So removing the 9 non-applicable episodes, we have 7 hustles to 10 times the Eds were scammers, which is actually a lot more balanced than I would have anticipated. Like, I think this really shows the Eds were really creative entrepreneurs, providing cool things to these kids like cities and tours and stuff. They just weren't always honest about it. I think we'll get a lot more scammy as the show goes on, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you so much to my lovely Patreon and Ko-fi supporters: Elsewhere, James Bond 3W, Buggy, Niaru Senpai, Robert Rock, Jeffrey R, Jakira, Luther, Richard M, Flynn Lee, and Paul H. Alright, I'll talk to you next Friday. Bye.